When you first started track and field as a teen, that was in America, was there a strong support system in your opinion, whether it be financially, turnout to events?
Um, no, there was no there was no support at all, and as a result, they lost a lot of talented athletes who could not um, compete for the country, given their own financial constraints. So my first year running for Trinidad and Tobago was 1992, and in that year, if you didn't have the means to pay for your own coach or sort of support yourself, then you were not going to go any further because there was no assistance from the government. There were no, I mean, for a young athlete starting out, there was going to be no initial sponsorship. So no, that was like the dark ages.
Okay. And but as you went on to win major Olympic titles and such, because of that lack of support, did you feel that typical bandwagonist mentality of Trinidadians to, they didn't know you existed until you brought home that medal?
Yeah, to a certain extent, but that is not unique to Trinidad. Um, in especially that sport period, there's a young boy or girl out there now that is working and toiling and is never going to feel like they are appreciated until the first time they win a medal or do something for their country. And then everybody goes, oh my gosh, we love him or her, greatest thing ever. That is, in a way, that's life. So, yeah, I mean, my case was very unique because remember that in between my medals in Atlanta and Hazley Crawford's gold in '76, we had 20 years of
Of
nothing.
nothing, yeah.
20 years is a very, very long time. So when you, as a country, have gone through 5 Olympics and you have won absolutely nothing, the next person who finally breaks that drought is going to be revered anyway. So I didn't. I guess that tempered some of the feelings of, oh, here comes the bandwagon, as opposed to, hey, here's this young man who has just won 2 more medals for us, who has just won 2 more medals for us, and and broken a drought that's 20 years old.
But many athletes over the past 5 years kind of have been making comments about not feeling supported in TNT. Some would call out the sports ministry in terms of the financial aspects, but more recently, some have been saying they don't feel recognized and they're considering running for other countries. What do you make of all of this?
Mhm. Um, well, your reference to the athlete who didn't feel recognized and wants to run for another country, every athlete understood what she meant. She won the first medal in the history of Trinidad and Tobago in the 4x1. She was part of the 4x1 team, and in typical TNT fashion, they did absolutely nothing for that team. I know because my athlete was also on that team, and she was 17 years old at the time. They did nothing for that team. Now, you could look at that team and say, well, they only win bronze, or you can look at it and say, how else are you going to get the next generation if you don't honor the first generation? Because that's part of it. Now, in terms of the whole going to run for somebody else, Trinidad and Tobago is not the country to pull that on because the reaction to that is never going to be positive. And as you may have seen, the reaction to her saying that was not good, and she's going to, I think, pay a price publicly for having said that. Most of the athletes talking about the support system is not there are correct because what happened in the whole government support system was put in place in large part because of that was kind of the last thing I did on the way out the door. But in typical TNT fashion, it became abused. So you had the permanent secretary helping out people who he knew and people who hadn't run for 2 years getting the money. So eventually it went from everybody who was not supposed to get money getting money to, okay, we're not giving anybody money, or it's going to be so hard to get any money that we're going to frustrate you all to death. So I know the athletes who are saying that, some of them, they're just underachieving and want to be rewarded for mediocrity, but most of them they actually have a point.
Okay. But in general, not just TNT specific, athletes who represent countries other than their place of birth, how do you feel about that?
Um, I'm not so sure, because on the one hand, I could have certainly run for the states. That's something I love to hear, because people say, "Oh, he ran for Trinidad because he couldn't run for the states." There's only two Americans that ever beat me in the Olympics, so I could have run for either one. Um, I ran for TNT because I looked very carefully at who it would mean more to, and made the decision based on that. But I also coached Khalifa, who was born and raised here, but you spend 5 minutes with Khalifa and you go, "Oh my gosh, she's as Trini as they come." So I think it's a very personal decision. So you would never see me sort of put into the public sphere, or if you're born here, you should run there, because I mean, half the U.S. team was born somewhere else. I get half of the British team was born somewhere else. Half of the German team are children of
And you see
immigrants.
that
So
in other
it's a
sports too.
yeah, 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 yeah. The minute That's a very slippery slope you're gonna start going down, because most of the times when people who say that are only looking at the surface, and you don't realize that if you get a little bit of depth, you'll realize that there's a lot of countries that have foreigners or immigrants competing for them on in several sports.
When we discuss track and field, typically people tend to focus on track and neglect things like javelin and shot put. Like when Keyshawn won the gold, most people didn't know we even had a representative for javelin until that moment. What do you think is the
Right,
reason for our focus on
right.
track rather than track and field?
Trinidad and Tobago doesn't even really focus on track. Track and field is like a bastard sport in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, myself and Richard Thompson and Kishon in the last 20 years have probably reversed that a lot. And of course, now the 4x4. But for the most part, your the public's um, the public's perception and the public knowledge of a sport has to be driven by your media. Most of the media in TNT don't know anything. I mean, Garth Watley comes to mind and Kwame Lawrence comes to mind, and they both work for the same paper. So, I mean, you look at some of the stuff that gets written in the Guardian or the Newsday or some of these other publications, like they know nothing about track and field. So, of course, they're not going to go and find some story or tell you about.
As in, through the writing, you can tell that they don't have knowledge on it.
They don't. They don't. So what you get in Trinidad is, and this is media in general in Trinidad now. They write whatever is the easiest story. They sit down in some press conference and the minister say this, and they write, "The minister said blah blah blah." They're not reporters. They're almost stenographers. So in track and field, the reason why a man like Keshawn Walker could win World Juniors, win Carifta on the last throw, go to the Olympics and win. And on the day that he won, the citizens of his country go, "Okay, who's this again? He win the gold medal in the javelin." It, it's largely in part because of the media. It's because of the media. So I put that right at the foot of the media. So you talking about field? I'd be happy when they start to acknowledge track and field. When they start acknowledging track and field as a whole.
And one thing I realize is we capitalize on the entertainment factor on almost every other sport. We see it in CPL, we see it sometimes in football when there are big matches and people decide to turn out. But do you think that entertainment factor can be something brought to track and field? Because when people speak to me about why they don't attend track meets and such, they say they find it's boring. But people mostly used to
Boring.
say that about cricket, and then they'd carry the lime there and make it exciting. Do you think this is something that
Right.
can be brought to track and field?
It's funny you should say that, because right now I am pressured to add right now there's like a kind of a mini Caribbean circuit. So there's Grenada, there's Guadeloupe, there's the Chris Brown Invitational in the Bahamas, there's one in there's the what's this girl's name? There's a girl who has a meet in Guyana. They're not well-known meets, but the circuit is picking up steam. And Grenada had a really phenomenal edition of the when they renamed the stadium, the Karani James Stadium this year. So they're pressuring me now to bring a leg of this to Trinidad and Tobago. And I can visualize what it could be. I remember some of the good meets that we had with my club when we would come down and so on. Yes, you have to bring the entertainment factor. You have to have somebody kind of hyping up the crowd in between, because track and field can be difficult to watch, particularly for a population who is not
Into it.
completely versed in.
Yeah.
Right. So if I go ahead and I do that, yeah, that's going to be a big part of it. Here's the problem that we have in Trinidad too, and this is not track and field, this is sports in general. You cannot solve new problems with old thinking. And you have a bunch of old men that sit down in the seats of power across the board in these various sports. They're not bringing no new ideas. Whatever they learned in the 60s or the 70s or whatever is good enough, and mediocrity rules the land. So when you come with your new, fresh ideas, it's like, no, who is you? So I am inclined to do this meet because I feel like track and field needs sort of an injection in the arm. As somebody so brilliantly wrote recently, we have fooled ourselves into thinking that our sport in Trinidad is doing well. The football could not be worse. The cricket, well, if you think 2020 is a big deal, then you think it's the greatest thing ever. The West Indies cricket right now is as bad as it's ever been. Track and field is not doing well. We are hanging on, hoping we get a medal on the last day. We wait till the last 2 days to get medals at the last World Championships. What happens to us is we are in the hospital bed on the way out, and every now and then something happens where the person goes clear and they hit us with the jolt, and something happens and we go, hey, look how good sports is. The last thing that happened was the World Cup. The time before that was the 4x4 world title. Before that was 2020. And occasionally we have like a volleyball or something that, people kind of, oh, okay, great. Sport in Trinidad and Tobago needs a major overhaul, and the first thing I would like to see is this reliance that we have on the ministry. The ministry, government in general, does not work well in Trinidad and Tobago. If you don't believe me, go look at the flooding, and it's like nothing in TNT works. Passport, whatever it is not going to work. So when you tie sport to that, of course, sport going to have the same issues.
And the thing is, with this story that I'm working on, being here for school in Jamaica, when I see the kind of support for even primary school, secondary school, full stadiums, that's the comparison is also part of the story, because I'm amazed at how secondary school races could have a packed out stadium, and meanwhile in Trinidad people are barely showing up to events, and then claiming that they've been supporting the athletes since forever when they win gold.
But you have to understand that Jamaica does machines better. Jamaica does machines better. And that Boys and Girls Champs is a machine. It's a 110-year-old machine. And that machine works because even the millstones, and Jamaica has some administrative millstones too, but that brand and that thing is so powerful that it sort of rolls over everything else. The sponsor, that's the only meet I ever see where Coke and Pepsi line up to sponsor. Usually if you call Coke and they say, yeah, Coke, or they want to come on board, we have Pepsi. Say, nah, we have Pepsi, we don't want. Coke will say, nah, we will take this outside and let them take this outside. It's a machine. We don't have that machine. So they have that machine where it starts Wednesday and it ends Saturday. And it's this big thing, and people fly from California and Seattle and Europe and thing and put on the time they go, because it is about the lime and the reunion and so on. What do we have that's like that? 2020 cricket is getting like that, and that's why it's been successful.
And maybe secondary school football is not even that big at home, but it's
in my era, yes, not in your era.
That's the same thing.
Era, secondary. In my parents' era, it was the biggest
That's the same thing, because I actually interviewed Shaka last week for another story I'm doing, and when he told me about how packed out stadiums used to be for secondary school matches, I was like, what? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but all generation have phone and thing. Nobody gonna line up and let old horse run over them in Hudson. Them days done.
And my final question is, what advancements or achievements would you like to see from TNC in track and field within next 10 years?
The first thing we have to do is to fix that clock. When I say fix the clock, we have developed a reputation where people run fast in Trinidad and Tobago and they don't run any fast anywhere else. When I was an athlete, and I said it, they said, well, Ato jealous because he never ran sub 10. I coach a young lady who ran her PR and the national junior record on that track. And I'm telling you, we have our doubts. I go all over the planet and watch meets from the highest levels, the Olympics, the World Championships, to the lowest. When the person crosses the line, the clock stops. Our clock does not stop. Why in 2017 does our clock not stop? We have to change that. We have to start to restore the credibility
That's an
of our.
actual thing?
As far as I have, as long as I have been alive, when the person crosses the line in the stadium, the clock keeps running. It does not display a time, and 2, 3, and a minute or two later, they put up the time. We have no credibility when it comes to that. That's one. The second thing that we have to do to improve track and field in terms of advancements, we have to get away from this thing with the ministry and the sport company. If you see, track and field is led by the wrong people in that country. So if it was a bunch of white men or red boys, as my father says, um, they have the ability to go and sit down with some powerful people in the corporate community and get track and field funded. At the end of the day, we could talk all the World Cup strippiness we want and 2020. There are about 10 countries that play cricket well in the world. Track and field is what Trinidad and Tobago is known for. Not football, not cricket, not field hockey, not volleyball. Track and field. Look at our Olympic history. We need to tie big corporate money to that sport. The problem why we don't have that, despite the success, is that those companies go, we are not going to hand our money to an organization like the N3As that is going to either steal it, mismanage it, or piss it away. Until you do that, none of this is going to change. In 1992, when I first showed up, the same complaints were going on. It is now 2018. It's the exact same thing. What has not changed is you have people who, yeah, they are so called leaders, but they don't have the capacity to go and to really change how track and field is funded. Until you change how track and field is funded, nothing's going to change.